Hello, third grade. So what you're seeing right now is me drawing this angler fish from observation, looking at my photocopy, and now I'm outlining with Sharpie marker, adding a little bit of color around the eye, and erasing any pencil lines that are poking through. Okay, so now that I have my fish drawn and outlined with permanent marker, I erased any pencil lines that I had not traced over with my marker. I'm ready to paint. And so I chose red for my fish, and then I also have some white tempera and some black tempera in my mixing tray. I have three reds. The reason I have three reds is one red is just going to stay red, and then another red I'm going to mix with white and red mixed with black to create tints when you mix white and red together, and shades when you mix black and red together, or black with a color, any color, doesn't have to be red, and white with any color, doesn't have to be red. And I also have a variety of paint brushes. So I have some flat paint brushes that have the square end, and then I have some round paint brushes. I have large and small, and I even have a medium here just in case I need it, because my fish has a lot of details, a lot of little spaces that I want to make sure that I paint neatly, so I need a small paintbrush. I also have a sponge because I need a dry paintbrush. I don't want water on my paintbrush with my paint because then it makes my paint runny and it makes it look almost like watercolor, and I want it to be a nice dark heavy color. So I'm going to probably start with red, and I have my reference photo here that has value on it already, which is helpful. So I know this is my lightest area, this is my medium area, and then this is my darkest area. So I could essentially just focus on this being where I do my tints, where I mix white with my color, and this being where my shades are, where I mix black with my color, and then the medium value is just the color without white or black. So I'm going to start with a flat paintbrush, dry it off, so I just pull it across the sponge. I don't use the printed side that's got the scrubby side on it. I just use the sponge side, pulling it across until no more water comes out. Dip my paintbrush in my paint and start painting in my fish. So I'm using a flat paintbrush right now because I want to get along the edges as neatly as possible, and a flat paintbrush I find is easier to use to get in those edges. And you can see when I paint thin, a thin layer of paint, that it almost looks pinkish. And you might find that too. And our black might look a little brownish. And when you start to add and mix and create your hues, your second mixing two colors to create another color, you might find that the yellow turns greenish or the orange turns brownish, and so that's okay as long as you're mixing two colors together, because our learning objectives are to know how to mix two colors together to create a new hue. So we're going to create tints when we add white, black shades when we add black. And looking at my picture here, this is about where the medium value is. There's some medium value around the eye here. And so I'm just kind of blocking it in because I'm going to be overlapping it with the shades and the tints. Alright, so what you're seeing is me use a flat paintbrush and decide that it's too big and I don't like using it around the round warts, so I got myself a smaller paintbrush, but a round paintbrush, the green handle paintbrushes. So the next step is to mix shades. So I'm going to mix my shade, but my divots are pretty full. So I need to take part of the red, move it to an empty divot, and then get a small amount of black to just make a small change in my color. So I'm making a shade, and then I'm going to paint that around the outer edge where you can see on my photocopy where the darkest shade is. And I noticed that it's not quite dark enough, so I need to add a little bit more black to the paint to make a second shade. Now you only have to have a medium color, which is just the color by itself, one tint and one shade. But you can do more than one tint and more than one shade. So I've decided that I need a second shade for the outermost edge of my fish. And as I'm painting that darker shade, I notice that it's covering up my Sharpie. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint. And when the paint is completely dry on another art class, I'm going to use the Sharpie again over the top of the paint to clean up my edges and camouflage any wonky edges. And when I change from one value to the next value in paint, I don't want it to be stripy. I want it to be more gradual. And I like to use a flat paintbrush along the edge of the fish and round paintbrushes for the inside of the fish. Do not mix all three colors together. It's a mistake. It's bad. It'll make it grayish color, and I'll know, and then you will not have met the objective. Remember, the objective is to mix two colors together, not mix three. Now, looking back at this video, I can see that I got way too much paint, and it's so wasteful. So I probably only needed one divot of red, maybe 1.5 divots of red, because I can move some of that red into another divot and mix a tint. And I don't need a lot of paint. This is a small paper and a small fish, so I don't need a lot of paint to just fill it in. And I think even if you have a large animal on a large paper, you still probably don't need 3 full divots of your color and then black and white. And then I mixed a second tint for the warts on my fish. So I have that inside of my fish a lighter tint, but then I added more and more white to it to make it the lightest tint possible of the red for my warts. Here's my finished fish with value. I have light value, medium value, and dark value. I have another fish that's finished here. And at this one I chose the green, and I did the marker, but then I went back over my marker lines in some areas. So you can see here this marker line's painted over, but then this marker line is on top of the paint. So I went back and I added some edges and some detail with the black marker to just clean up the smeary paint and make it look a lot nicer. So I will do the same thing for this fish before I say it's finished and upload it to Artsonia. On the last day, when my paint is completely dry, and I haven't painted on this day, I'm cleaning up any wonky edges and any black Sharpie that's not quite bright enough by tracing over the dry, completely dried paint with a Sharpie marker. So now that I'm finished, I need to clean up my mess. So if my neighbor's not using the sponge anymore, I'm the last one to use the sponge, I'll need to put that away in the cabinet with the basket. If my neighbors are finished with the water basin and I'm the last one painting, then I need to dump the water basin out, put it upside down on the black towel. And each person needs to rinse out their own paintbrushes. So I got 5 paintbrushes here. So I have 5 paintbrushes I really need to rinse out really well, and then put bristle side up, put the bristles up in the orange bucket to dry. This needs to be rinsed out too. I can use one of these big paintbrushes, run this under the faucet, but not the faucet on full blast because it'll go everywhere. Just a slow, gentle water coming out of the faucet. And then use my paintbrush to clean out each one of these divots. And even the divots I didn't use, I need to clean those out too, because a lot of times what's happening is students who use white, they don't clean out the white area because they don't see it because the tray is white. So clean out all the divots, even if you don't see paint in it, just to make sure you get all the paint out, because we don't like to reach in to the cabinet and get our mixing trays out and get paint all over ourselves. So make sure you have this completely cleaned up. Also clean out the back of your divot, the back of your mixing tray, because sometimes you drip on your placemat and then the back of your plate has paint on it too. So flip it over and look at the back. And this will go in the black strainer standing up to dry. These paintbrushes go bristle side up in the orange bucket. The water basin should be upside down. And that's how you correctly clean up your